Hey, good morning, everybody. This is People of Substance by LemonSkies, and my guest today is Kia Croom. I'll let you introduce yourself in just a moment. And Kia is the founder of Kia Croom Fundraising, and we'll talk about that in a second. Today is a very special day, so I'll let her speak to that. Kia is a host and founder of a podcast called the Black Fundraisers Podcast, and she has about 2 decades of fundraising experience. So I think she started as a teenager. So we'll talk about that. And she has lots of background in working with homelessness, education, youth engagement, AIDS, just the gamut. Kia, please introduce yourself.
Thank you. Let me say first, thank you for having me this fine day. Kia Croom, President and CEO of Kia Croom Fundraising and Philanthropy, a Black woman-owned fundraising firm that's rooted in equity and inclusion. Our motto is inclusion is as inclusion does, right? And I'm just thrilled to be here. You're absolutely right. And you're so kind to say that I started fundraising, maybe as a teenager. I'll attribute that to, the Benjamin Button effect, kind of aging backwards. But a sister has been in this game strong for about 23 years. And my claim to fame is having raised nearly $500,000, primarily through major gift strategies and structuring large corporate partnerships for organizations that have social justice cause areas.
I mean, $500 million is a chunk of change. So let me kind of lay the groundwork. So I have had the pleasure to interview you recently at Bridge Conference, Bridge Live, and you and I have been talking on and off. And when I asked you a question of what can people do in nonprofit sector to be more inclusive, your answer was pass the mic.
Absolutely.
So that's kind of the intention here. And, you and I have had wonderful discussions over the time we've known each other. But it's really the idea here is to present you to the world and people that I know that may not know of you, but they really should, and they really should follow your thought leadership, etc. So before we talk about other topics, I just want to ask you about your backstory and how you ended up in the nonprofit space and what led you to be a founder.
Yeah, so it's an interesting story. I'll give you the truncated version. I was a college undergraduate student in Atlanta. I attended the Clark Atlanta University. Yes, I always announce the name that way because to me was such a great place. And it's owed that, right? That pomp and circumstance. So the Clark Atlanta University, and I was majoring in communications, which I'd known I wanted to do for a long time. I was writing for some local news publications. I'm a journalism student. So I was doing some news writing, some human interest writing, getting published. And I came across this great organization called Hope Through Divine Intervention. And I remember reaching out to the founder and, telling her that I was interested in her work. I wanted to volunteer. Basically, I volunteered to do, whatever I could, right? I was really intrigued by the way that she ran her program. She had a really, really lean organization. She had an incredibly passionate board of people from the faiths communities. And this organization, let me back up. This organization was a homeless assistance agency providing emergency shelter for men that had were living with co-occurring mental health and substance abuse, right? Substance abuse issues. I was just really intrigued with how passionate and how personable Her name is Selena Bean. How personable she was. Um, Representation matters is all I can say. I had never met someone that was doing quite this kind of work. And, I had ideas about, what executive leadership looks like. Again, I'm a young girl in college. So just seeing this leader demonstrate empathy, care, concern, passion, for her clientele, it just kind of grabbed me, right? And now that I'm talking to you about it, I think that she was really one of the first that I'd encountered that was actually doing the work, right? That I knew I was interested in. So the short of the long is I was volunteering. This organization had been fledgling. They had been, they being the board of directors, the founding executive director, they had really been funding it out of their pockets. Essentially, they were running off of a modest $150,000 budget, half of which was probably in kind. And they learned that, I was a writer, a journalist, and asked me to play my hand or, support them in applying for a United Way Atlanta grant. And I did. I didn't know what I was doing. Let me not say that. I did know what I was doing, right, as a writer. I looked at the grant application and I approached preparing that grant application with the same process that I would, talking with an interview subject. I sat down with Selena and a couple of the board members and captured their responses to the application. And little did I know, as I was going through that process with them and they were describing their programs and they were describing their vision, they were doing it in a way that they really hadn't done it before. I was pushing them to really think about who that organization was in the marketplace, right? What their value proposition was, what distinguished them from other homeless assistance organizations in the community. And it was a very clarifying process for them in the process, right? And they thought, oh, we really are filling a niche. We're serving a subpopulation of a broader homeless population, if you will. And they had some epiphanies about the work that they were doing and who they were. The short of the long is they submitted the grant. I continued volunteering and being a happy-go-lucky first generation college student. And months later, they were jumping for joy that they got this, I want to say it was a $200,000 gift from the United Way Atlanta, the largest that they'd ever received. And they were just ecstatic. And
Sure.
they're like, you remember when you did this? We want you to do more of that. And I'm like, oh, okay, cool. Yeah, I'm down with it, right? And I never looked back. That was my entree into the nonprofit sector. Years and years of professional development, of training. I mean, that experience changed my life. And the last thing I'm going to say is it really helped me to discover how to use my communications training, writing, speaking background in a really mission-driven way that I hadn't considered prior to then. And it was clear to me that this was the path that I needed to go career-wise, and I never looked back.
So you probably were hooked, like hearing about this $200,000 contribution to the organization that you obviously cared for was probably just such a high moment.
It was a high moment. It was a high moment for so many reasons, because when I looked at the program beneficiaries, Society had written them off. The men that were in the program that were relying on the shelter beds, these were Black men that had served our country, Vietnam War veterans, Operation Iraqi Freedom veterans, and they found themselves in this particular space and time in a rough set of circumstances, down on their luck. And here, this program provided a lifeline. And because I have uncles and, family friends that had that same lived experience as some of those program beneficiaries, when I looked at them and when I talked to them, I saw my uncles, I saw my friends of the family, that I'd grown up seeing, folks that might have been living with some mental illness and trying to manage it or manage addiction. Yeah, they had an illness, but they were people and they deserved a second chance. They deserved a high quality housing program or a hand up out of a really difficult circumstance. So, it was just such a clarifying, just a hallmark in my journey. And I'm so grateful for it.
Well, I think the sector is better off for it that you took that turn.
Thank you.
So, we talked a little bit about fundraising, and you've been in the sector for a little while. What are some recent trends that you're seeing in our sector that are impacting fundraising, but also charitable work at large?
Oh my God. So the primary one on the top of my list is AI. Is the use of AI to equalize, right, or level the playing field. I sit before you as an entrepreneur, a CEO of a growing corporation that I'm building. I'm also a nonprofit founder. I don't have a 5-10 person team, right? What I do have is a small but mighty team, and we're enjoying learning the use of the various tools that really allow us to streamline our workflows and processes to get things done, right? To get things done swifter, right? And to be able to publicize and better promote our work. I'm using a bunch of generative AI tools for content writing, marketing, promotions, blogging, you name it. It's just everything.
It's a brave new world. I mean, I think of it as, Google, before the world before Google, you had to get the stack of books at the library to do any sort of research. And now it wouldn't even occur to you because you have it all at your fingertips.
Absolutely. I'm loving it. That would be the top of my list right now.
So let's shift conversation. I know you speak to this subject quite a bit, inclusion, et cetera, but I want to talk about a very particular aspect of inclusion. And I've heard you speak about cultural fit. And how do we make nonprofits inclusive and welcoming in a meaningful way? So, I think if you've paused and thought about the subject of diversity, equity, and inclusion, it's not about the box checking, but how do you make a meaningful change and not only, flipping the equation, not just think about it, well, we're giving you an opportunity, but create a place that people want to be.
Yeah, I mean, I think that first and foremost, it really starts with an organization's leadership. I don't think I know, right? This isn't Croom conjecture. This is proven, right? And research shows that people in general in the market for jobs are wanting to go to work at places that value diversity, equity, and inclusion, in spite of all the backlash that DEI is receiving in this space and time, right? What I know is this: it starts with leadership. It starts with having leaders that are on an accord, to operationalize inclusion, right? What does that look like? The short of the long is it looks like sharing power. And people get really weirded out about sharing power, whether they want to be honest about it or not, right? Because for so long, and even in some cases, even now, like this, there are still folks that are working in environments or organizations or companies where the leadership is just top down, right? There isn't really a feedback loop from the junior staff or the entry level staff to the executive leadership. When we talk about inclusion and um, creating a more equitable and inclusive environment, it really requires that sharing of power. It requires that leaders give a damn. You know what I mean? That people demonstrate empathetic leadership. It requires that people listen and enlist feedback from their employees. It requires that leaders gain insights from employees, some of which they may not necessarily want to hear, right? When leaders began to really prioritize inclusion and inclusive leadership, and I've got a whole theory that I've trademarked on inclusive, the theory of inclusive fundraising, right? What it takes to create an inclusive climate for successful fundraising, right? A whole theory that, folks, if you should follow me, you'll hear about it, you'll read about it. It really requires leaders to change what they might have been taught about leadership, from being that leader that's, outcomes driven. Yeah, we're concerned about outcomes, right? But if we're taking care of the people in the organization and hearing the people and gaining insights from them and allowing those insights to shift and influence and inform the work that we do and the manner in which we do it, right? There's tremendous value in doing that. There's diversity of thought, for instance. And these kinds of things are transformative and far reaching, but it really starts with leadership.
So when you're describing, and I don't think these are theoretical concepts because you've personally seen them, experienced them, worked with them. So, but when we're describing it and kind of the concept of being welcoming and inclusive, can you give examples of what not inclusive looks like? That's not blatant, that's not obvious, but, obviously, people experience every day. But if you haven't lived it, it's hard to really understand unless somebody educates you about it.
Yeah, I'm happy to do that. So, an example top of mind for me, and something that I contend with as a Black woman fundraiser in this space, is what I call, and not just what I call, but what society calls white supremacist professional standards, right? What are those? So glad you asked, right? So glad you want to know. White supremacist professional standards are those unspoken, that unspoken dress code, right? I was groomed to wear a pinstripe suit, to wear a string of pearls when I'm interviewing, to wear clear fingernail polish, right? To not wear lipstick and different things, to just essentially mute any colorful characteristics that I normally, trend towards, right? And just become, a real plain Jane to kind of fit into a culture. So if I'm interviewing, it's either a navy blue suit with a white collar shirt and a string of pearls and a pearl earring, a Brooks Brothers suit or a St. John suit with a brooch, and I'm looking like, somebody from Dynasty when I'm a girl from East Oakland.
And
Right?
and it's cross sectionality, right? Like if we're wearing navy blue pinstripe suits, it's also not just racial differences, but it's also gender.
Absolutely, gender. And I didn't even think about this until now, but like, the economics of it, right? Because there were times when I was interviewing and I didn't really have the money to go and buy that Brooks Brothers pinstripe suit, but I felt that pressure to do that instead of going and getting the blue suit from Kohl's or JC Penney's, which, my pockets could afford at the time. No, that wasn't good enough. As a Black woman that's interviewing for a role in executive leadership or even a mid-level role, I had to put my best foot forward, and I had to do everything that I could to suggest that I would be a good cultural fit, which required me to mute any individuating characteristics about myself to fit into this culture, right? No.
Right. Right.
No. How about I be able to interview like this, right? Because this is who I am, right? With long braids. These braids are what? 18, 20 inches with, I've got on black today, but if I wanted to wear a suit with a pop of color, I'm not saying just abandon the suit if you want to wear the suit, but people of color, we tend to like color. We tend to be colorful, right? For a variety of reasons. So when I talk about these white supremacist professional standards and how they really delimit opportunities for people of color, in particular, it's this idea that we have to assimilate. So it's this norm, it's these standards. You need to be wearing bangs and a bun and these suits and these pearls. I don't wear pearls. I wear Ankara, African prints. I wear ornate necklaces and golds, and that's me. So if anybody's watching this, my takeaway would be, what are the norms inside of your organizations? How are people expected to dress, right? When you think about that, what does your environment say about your organization's values around inclusion? Am I expected to assimilate, right? Or will I experience belonging, right? In coming as I am with my long braids, my red lipstick, and my pops of color. That's the one that's knocking so many people out of the box, is those white supremacist standards.
Kia, what's beautiful about this is that you and I are able to have these conversations very openly. And it's not, the irony is not lost on me because I don't think I'm wearing pearls at the moment, but the irony is not lost on me. But, that comfort level to ask the question and to just really put it out on the table and have a conversation about it. Why is it that people are not comfortable having those conversations?
You know what? I'm trying to figure that out. I've been trying to figure it out for some time. And I think that, let's just be honest. I've been told by white allies and even non-allies that, some Black people aren't approachable. I don't know what an approachable Black person looks like or does, or to suggest that they're approachable. It kind of gives that angry Black woman trope, right? But I'm a trained practitioner in this, so I'm very comfortable having really civil and honest
Yep.
conversations about it. Is everybody able to navigate those with grace? In defense of my white allies and non-allies that say it's difficult to talk to people of color about race and, race relations and things. I get it. And if I were to put myself in your shoes, it might not be super comfortable for me. But I just really think that folks don't want to run the risk of being outed or suggesting that they're racist or, they're prejudiced, which we all have prejudices. I have prejudices. You have prejudices. Everybody has prejudices. It's not necessarily a bad thing to have prejudices. Own that you have prejudices. Where it toes the line is when those prejudices are coupled with power and you're able to prevent someone from benefiting from an opportunity. You know what I mean? When that prejudice and power delimits opportunities for other people, that's where it's dangerous. But I own your prejudices. Somebody could walk up to me and say, well, thought that, long braids, we call them, poetic justice braids back in the day. And, the girls in the hood that wore them, talked a certain way and this, that, and the third. Okay, yeah, we did. But you're talking to one that's highly educated, that's very seasoned, super diplomatic. So does this change your prejudice? Does it give you a lens of someone that doesn't fit that stereotype? I hope it does, right?
Yeah.
I think it's just fair. People are afraid of being on the wrong side of this stuff. And my reaction or response to that is we can't make progress if people are rooted in living in fear like that. There's no way we're going to make progress. We have to be able to have these conversations.
No, I agree wholeheartedly, and I deeply appreciate your willingness to be so open and candid and just really calling it out, because it's important for people to hear. And probably the followers of your podcast know that and have lived that.
Absolutely.
So
Absolutely.
that's why it's important to kind of bring a whole new audience and a whole new broaden that message, if you will.
Absolutely.
So, Kia, we talked about a lot of serious, big topics. To wrap up our conversation, I wanted to suggest we play a round of a game called Two Truths and a Lie. Have you ever played that?
I have.
So, just to be clear, it's not like the college round down in Atlanta where, things deteriorate very quickly.
Right.
So, if you can give me two truths and a lie, I will try to call out which one is the fib.
Okay. Two truths and a lie.
And I know you, but I don't know you personally as well to know.
I got some good ones.
Okay.
I got some good ones for you. Okay. I wasted champagne on Diddy. I hope everybody knows who Diddy is. P. Diddy, right? I wasted a bottle of champagne on Diddy. I drive fast sports cars, and I I want to give you a good one. I want to make this complex because you be on it. Okay, I watch you. You be on it. So I'm trying to make this a little challenging for you, madam, because I know how swift you are on these. Shucks. And finally, I visited 6 continents. Frequent traveler.
So I'm going to say that the champagne and Diddy has to be true. I really hope it's true because I feel like there's got to be a story behind it.
It is true. I wasted champagne on Diddy.
Did you like pour it
I
on
did.
him?
I so we're talking about them now, or do we want to go through?
Okay, so I think that one is true. I
Okay.
feel like driving fast cars, I feel like that would be on brand for you. Um, and the
Okay.
continents, I'm going to catch you on technicality. It's probably like 5 instead of 6. I think it's like a small technicality there. So I'm going to call that one to be the fib.
I told you be on it. You are absolutely
I got it.
right. That was the lie, and I might have. I didn't even count. The whatever, right? But no, you're right. I mean, I'm a frequent traveler, but I haven't ventured out to Europe. There's a few places a sister hasn't visited yet. Having been a beach girl, I'm a Cali girl, so I love the beach. So I tend to vacation in the Caribbean, right? And Central America, my jam. But there's places like I haven't been to the motherland, but I'm looking forward to go, and haven't been to Europe. It's a lot of places I haven't been, right? I do have a need for speed. I'm a Cali girl. My first car, old school car, was a 87 IROC Camaro. I love that car. I souped it up. It had T-tops. It was heavy as all hell. The doors were heavy, but she was fast, right? You know how we are in Cali about our cars, especially our old school cars. In fact, my current car, my baby, her name is Katy Perry. Katy Perry is a fast car. I did spill champagne on Diddy. Yes, I did. And he was very, very gracious. And I was certain I was going to get fired. I was working at a nightclub in Atlanta, an undergrad student. I was a bottle girl, opened the bottle, didn't quite open it. It was a little fizz, and champagne did go on Diddy. And I thought that I was going to get fired because I'm like, oh my gosh, what am I going to do? But he was super gracious about it, and he told me, don't worry about it, baby girl, don't worry about it. So yes, that did happen.
Such a great story.
That did happen. Yes.
That's
yes.
amazing. That's amazing. Well, Kia, it was wonderful to have you. I really appreciate you being here, and just appreciate our friendship. So thank you for sharing. Thank you for being here. And I appreciate everyone who is listening.
Thank you. It's been a pleasure.